So data table is nothing but it's a tabular data which we will be using inside of our Microsoft.NET programming language. Any of the programming language, C# or VB, like we will be using the naming. We will be using it as a data table, and what actually it is, it's a tabular data. And because why I'm saying it is a programmatic language, because in Python it will be data frame, right? And table is nothing but the rows and columns. The combination of rows and the columns we call it as a table. And it is kind of like a data table is nothing but it's a type of a variable which holds the tabular data. And how we can access the data inside of our data table, we can access with the help of row index and the column index, and also row index and the column. Okay. And if you remember in the previous sessions, when we are dealing with the variables and data types, we have seen this error in case if our variable is not initialized. We have seen this for array, list, and dictionaries. Right? In the similar way, even the data table also should be initialized in order to avoid this error. So directly we cannot declare and use the variable. We need to initialize the variable. Like we can have some data, or without that data also we can initialize the variable and we can utilize that variable in the rest of our process. What happens? Satish just dropped off. Okay. And here, how to initialize? Initialize the data table. Do you have any idea, guys? There are two different ways to initialize. One is data table variable is equal to new data table. Using this in assign activity, will create an empty and non-schema data table. When I say non-schema, what does it mean is we don't have any schema defined for it. If you see here, right, we didn't define what are the different columns also. So you have 0 columns and 0 rows. When I say an empty, 0 columns and 0 rows. What I can say is I can say 0 rows will be an empty data table, and non-schema is 0 columns, because we don't have any columns or rows for this data table variable. So we initialized our data table without having any schema or without having any data. And the second way is to using build data table activity. Using this, we can initialize the data table with columns and also with some row values if required. So in these two ways, we can initialize our data table. But the second one is with the data is optional and we can define the columns. It is up to us whether to define the columns or not. Okay. And now let us consider the above scenario. We don't have any columns, right? In that case, we need to add a couple of columns to our table. See, without having the columns, we cannot add the rows value, row data. So for that, first we need to add the columns to the existing data table. And here, though we define some columns, and if you want to add few more columns, So how we can do that? We can add any number of columns using how to add columns to data table using add data column activity, then add the columns to existing or initialized data table. Okay. And the next point is, see, we have a lot of things like which we will discuss after jumping into the studio and coming back. I want to highlight one more point. I have a data table with rows and columns. Okay. How can I access all the row values one after the other? So here, how I can access the values of a data table, row values of a data table, using for each row activity, and we can use row of column index or row of column name. So either of these two we can access under the for each row activity. We covered for each previously, but we didn't cover for each row activity. Okay. And now we are saying in multiple places index, right? So in UiPath or a C#, always index will start from 0. One second, guys. So if the position is 1, then my index will be 0, irrespective of whether it is a column or a row. So the index will always start from 0. And when when we are saying that, like, let me add one more row here. Insert column, insert to right, insert to right. So this is my second object, third item. So the numbering will be always -1. The position -1 will be our index. Do you want to ask any question?
Can you give some example as well here?
Yeah, sure. Satish, do you want to ask any question? It's like please go on. So anyhow, like we are going to access it. Just remember that index will be from 0 and the position is from 1. So we will do that as well now. So let us come here. I'm reading the data from this challenge.xlsx. Open it up. Challenge.xlsx. Here is my data, right? And we are looping through each row of this data. So to access these values, we should loop through each row of that value. See, this is my first position, right? This is header. So if you ignore the header, this is my first row, which means this index will be 0. Okay. So this index will be 9. Okay, because it's a 10th item. And here this will be 0th column, first column, second column in terms of indexes. But actually this is the first column, but it is of 0 index. And this index is 1, second column. So in that way, we will be having it. So here we are looping through each row. And here we are calling with the name, first name, which means we should get this values. Okay. Let me close and let me run this flow. So here if you see in the output panel, so we are getting all the first name values. And first name is your first column, right? Let me reshare my screen. Is it clear now, Ashok? Perfect. So here first column is your first name is your first column. So when we say the first column, let me put 0 here instead of this. So we got the first column values by when we are calling with the name, and now we are calling it with the index, and we are giving the index 0, but it is my first column. Run this file. See here, we got the same names, which means we can access the row values either with the column names or with the index as well. So in this way, we can access the values. Clear, guys?
So path already basically we have a data store in the form of a string, right? In that basically first column, right? Or 0 index, right? So why basically we are converting here dot to string?
See, it is, you cannot be sure that like it is a string. See, in case if you are not using this, right, it will be a kind of object. Okay. Sometimes you will be having numbers. Numbers you cannot print. True or false. So we will be having such a scenario. So by default, we will be using this .to string because we when we are printing or something, or even if you have a different data type also, we will convert it to the string and then to convert into a different object type, because see, you may have the date time. So it all depends on your data. You hear me now?
Yeah. Now, Path, yeah, we can hear
It's
you.
a
Yeah, go ahead.
power outage, man. I'm not sure like whether you can see the screen or not with my mobile data. I just connected it. Let us see. So, see, by default, we will be converting it to the .2 string so that, like, in case if we want to convert that into any different object type, like, for example, daytime or something, right? It will be easy, and it is not even necessary all the time we need to convert it to the string. So we generally do that. Okay. Let us suppose if you have numbers, in that case, we may need to convert it to the string, right? So in such scenarios, like you may need to, but it is not always required to. Okay. So in this way, we can access the row values. Let us suppose I have this data table and I want to get only one particular row item, which is of first row item. Okay. So it is not necessary for us to use this for each row. And I want to get the value. Let me do one thing, guys. Again, always closing and opening is not a good idea. So I'm using this to read from the program, and I just copied just to have it opened up. So I want to get the value of first row, first column. Okay. So what are the different ways we have? Let us write a log message here. Data table dot rows of 0, 0. What I'm saying is, from this data table, I want the row value of 0, 0, which means 0th row, 0 column from this file. It should give me John. It should give me John. Let us see here, John, which means this is my 0th index and this is my 0th index. The common value is this. So we can access the values with the help of indexes, and also we can go with the column name as well. Here I can put the column name. Let's run that. And here we have a possibility of one failure scenarios. Let me add one more space here. Click on OK. Run this file. We got the error because we should have exact name what we have in the column. In case if you are having any one space, or like if you forgot to give one more space, so that will fail your process. What will happen now? It executes, because it doesn't matter whether you are giving the capital letters or small letters, but the spaces or the characters we are using should exactly same. Yes, recording is going on. So they should be exactly same. Okay. And let us suppose I have this table, right? I have this table, and I don't want to have this data. I want to add new data to this, but I want the same columns. What we can do? For that, we will take the assign activity, and we are going to create one more data table variable. We will do that later. Just for that, for now time being, let's hold on this. So I have a data table. I don't know like what are the different column names I have. Okay. I want to get the values from the row values from the columns where I have a keyword company. Okay. Irrespective what are the different names I have, I want to get the values where I have company. Or else, like, let us suppose I will have a keyword called as a phone, and I want to get the values of that particular column from the table. And I don't know what are the different column names I have. How can we do that? Get the column names. What we can do is we can use the for each loop. And here in the list of items, we can use data table dot columns. And this will loop through each column. Let me do one thing. Here we will use the log message. You will get such a scenarios for sure. Current item dot column name, because this is of type column, data column, because we are giving the list of columns to this. So column dot column name will return me the name of the columns. Let me remove this log message and let us run this so that we will get all the column names now. See here, first name, last name, company name, role, company address, email, and phone number. So we got all the column names. And here, what I will do is I'll use an if condition. In the if condition, current item dot column name dot contains phone. If I have the phone, then only print my values. Because till this place, we are not sure about the column name, right? For each row, now we will be using for each row of data table. And inside this, we will use the log message, and the value will be like this. Current row of, we need to provide the column name, right? Column name is nothing but current item dot column name. So this should return me all the phone numbers now. Let us run this file and see whether we are getting the phone numbers or not. See here, we got all the phone numbers. So here what we are doing is we are looping through each data column, and the data column name we can get it using the column. Current item is nothing but my data column. Dot column name will give me the column name, and I'm checking whether that is containing this phone or not. And this is my column name. See, this is column name we are getting dynamic way, and current row of column name is nothing but current item dot column name. So it will return me all the values of that particular column. And here we are not using the column name or a column index. So based on some keyword, we are getting it. Clear, guys? How we can do loop through each column? Let me do one thing. Let me write a log message here. Info current item dot column name. Okay. And instead of data table, right, I'll use the whatever newly created variable I have. This is my variable one. Okay. First, let us run this file. We will not have any log message now. And in fact, we may get that object reference not set to instance of an object. Yeah, you got it. will do is it will add all the columns whatever we have in this table to this variable one, and it will not add any data. First, let us run for this particular workflow and let us see what are the different columns we have in the variable one. Put panel. So we got all the column names, which means it is copying the schema, which means the column names, not the values. Okay, let us do one thing. We already saw that, right? Like the columns are got matched. So I want to keep the existing table and I want a new data table with the same columns. In such a scenarios, we will be using it. And let us go for a log message to print what we have in the variable one. Here we are cloning it to this variable one, and we have seen that all the columns came, and we need to make sure that no row data came into the picture. No data is available. We have only the columns available. Let us do one thing. We are going to use the same initial data table, and let us run. The values, right? Which means copy all the schema of existing data table to a new data table without copying the data. You can use data table variable dot clone. Will copy all of your columns to a new data table. Now, what I want to do is I'm looping through this data, right? I don't want to clone to a new data table, and I want to remove all the existing data from the existing data table. Till now we are having data, right? So clear data table. And we'll put the data table. Let us run this. Now we will not have any data, but we still have the columns for this. There is no output available. In case if I use for each loop, columns, run this. So we'll still have the schema, but the existing data will be removed. The clear data table will remove all your row data, and your columns will remain same. See, here this log message is not getting populated, which means clear data table activity clears all the row data, but columns will remain available. We can add new data to it if required. So we can clear the existing data, get a new data available. Here guys, till this place. Okay. So let me create a data table. So I'm not reading from this existing, and I want to deal with the new data table which we created. Data table variable. Again, each activity. Data table variable dot columns. Log message info item dot column name. Okay. Run this flow. We're getting that the object reference is not set. So let us do one thing. Let us initialize this. Let us run this. We should not get any error. We are not getting any error and we don't have any columns. So I said, right, to initialize the data table, we have two ways. One is to assign in this way, where we will not be having any row data or not even a column, right? And we can use the build data table activity. So let us bring up the build data table activity. And here in the output value, we will be assigning the variable which we want to initialize. And now click on this data table and a wizard will open. Here you can give your column names. And in case if you want to have some data also, you can have it. So for example sake, right, I'm just keeping this values. My column 1 is string, column 2 is integer, and I have a row value text 1. Click on OK. Now let us run this flow and see what are the different column names we have for this. Here we have column name 1, column 2. Right? So the build data table values, we can add the columns and rows also. Let us see the row as well. So we can use for each row in dynamic way for each column. I want to print the values of each column of messages. Here I'm not using any index. I'm just using all the rows. Run this. I have a column 1 and that I'm having text 1 row value. Column 2 I have only 1. Which means the build data table activity is going to give you, you should initialize your data table and also will give you some data in that. Clear till this place, guys? See, when we are trying to fetch the value, can give either of these two in order to get the value of a row item. And we have one activity, get row item. So here we need to provide the data row, which is nothing but table dot row of the row. So we need to pass in with the index the row, whatever the row item we want to have. In case if you are using this inside your for each row activity, if you are using this inside of this, then what you need to do is we just need to pass it as current row. It works. The reason is when you're looping through each row, then this will be your data row, and this supports the data row. And when we are using this outside of this, we need to clearly specify which index of the row, because inside your for each you are looping through each row, and current row is the your data row. But when you are giving from the data table, we need to use the syntax dot rows of index, which index you want to. And in the column, we can have either index or the name. We can provide either of these two. We can have column 1. The value output of this is row value. And let me write this row value. So either we can use the syntax or we can use the activity. So it is up to us how we want to access the value of that particular row item. Here it is. So either of the two ways we can get this values. Tell me, guys. Again, there is a power outage. Connected to the mobile hotspot. Can you hear me? Okay. So, guys, let me do one thing. Right? So, whatever we have in the data table activities. So, whatever we have, right? Please read each and every activity details from UiPath documentation portal, and then we will continue the session tomorrow, because a very frequent for every 5 minutes we are losing this power and it is creating a problem. So tomorrow I'll just make sure that like I'll travel to my office, so that like in case if the same problem persists, so that like we should not have any the breaks and all. So read out all the activity names and try to practice at least few. That be good enough, guys?
Sure, sure.